Welcome to another exciting show with me. This is your Vance, the host for tonight. And yeah, we are Kopi with Vance. And today we're going to talk about a little bit on psychology. That's right. This is one of the very famous, or rather, the most popular topic to talk about, because in our previous Kopi event shows, you have noticed that there's a lot of responses. So we decided to bring in an expert again with me today. My guest is just waiting at the backstage. But before that, tune in with Facebook, LinkedIn, and we are also at YouTube as well. And best part, you can also listen to our podcast at Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So without any further ado, I'm going to invite my guest speaker, Dr. Hanita Assudani. Hello, doctor. How are you there?
I'm good. Hi, Vance. Thanks for having me here today.
It's my pleasure to have you here with Kopi with Vance. But are you having your coffee with you right now?
Oh, I don't have coffee. I have some water. Maybe.
It's okay. We shall have our coffee one of these days. Thank you, doctor, for joining me at Kopi with Vance. And I know today we have a topic to talk today, which is responses to trauma. But before that, we jump into the questions that we have, or our audiences may have. You want to do a quick introduction about yourself, doctor?
Sure. My name is Hanita, and I work as a clinical psychologist. So I've worked as a clinical psychologist for many years. So I don't want to say how long in case you figure out my age.
Okay.
So it,
Okay.
um, it's more than a decade. So what I do as a clinical psychologist is I work with people who are having a hard time feeling anxious, stressed, depressed, and we work together by talking about these difficulties, and then we form a plan. And after a period of time, people start to feel a bit better, a bit calmer, and just generally feel, I think, a greater sense of well-being. So generally, that's what I do as a psychologist.
Right. So probably you been a psychologist for more than 15, 20 years.
Not 20 years, maybe 14, 15 years.
Okay, so we can roughly gauge the age already. Thank you, Doctor, for that lovely introduction. But of course, the viewers who are tuning in today, right now, or logged in with us, you can actually hear them at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook as well. So, Doctor, we are going to jump into the questions right now. When we say responses to trauma, but what is a trauma really is?
Yeah, that's a really important question. So trauma is any event that will overwhelm the ordinary human adaptation to life. So what that means, right, is that it can be a single event or a multiple event wherever you feel like your safety, your autonomy, your life, or even like your limbs are at threat. It can be something that you experience directly, or it can be something that you witness happening around you or other people that you care about. So let me just give an example, right? An example of a single event trauma may be if you're a victim of a crime. Let's say somebody stole your bag, or you were molested in the train, or a victim of an upskirt video. That is example of a single event trauma. Multiple event traumas, right, can be single events that happen sporadically over time, but usually it's something that happens over a period of time, such as growing up with very punishing parents. They punish you until you have injuries, which is considered child abuse, domestic abuse, or if you're a child, you're being groomed for sex by older relative. Can be things like workplace stress, things like that. These are all examples of trauma.
Right. So, doctor, I mean, whatever that happens during the childhood, a trauma, can it
Mm.
be with the person till his last breath, affecting him?
So what you're asking is, let's say if somebody undergoes, let's say, trauma as a child, will that
Yeah.
affect them, as an adult, till they're older adults? It really depends. So the thing with trauma, right, I think that's one of the myths, that if you undergo trauma, that's it. This is going to be with you forever.
Mhm.
Um, it may stay with you for a long time, especially if it's not processed properly or there's no place that is safe. However, as human beings, we are very adaptable and resilient. When we go through something that overwhelms us, we want to grow from it. So it might be that the person over the period of time when there are more resources as an adult, learn different ways of coping with what happened to them as a child.
Right. Doctor, this is a bit of like a memory storage, or can I say that, rather, can I say that is it something that we can't just forget about it? I forget about what has happened. Is that something that as simple as it can be, or is it trauma means it's really something serious we are talking about here?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we don't forget because trauma, like I mentioned, is something that overwhelms our ordinary human experience. It's something that above and beyond our human experience. But you know what? Let me just explain a little bit what happens in our brain during traumatic events. So there's this part of our brain, is an almond-shaped structure in our brain, in our temporal lobes over here. That plays a very important role in processing trauma. This is known as the amygdala. So what the amygdala does, it helps us to interpret emotional responses, particularly those related to fear and threat. So our amygdala is kind of our kind of thing that protects us. Okay. So in the face of trauma, the amygdala will trigger this response, and I'm sure you've heard of it, the fight or flight response.
Right.
Yeah. So this is the response that happens that triggers the stress hormones like adrenaline and prepares our body for survival. However, when there's trauma, right? The amygdala. So what the amygdala does, right, also is in our brain, it will communicate to the other parts of our brain to help us. So for example, it will communicate with the front part of our brain, which is called the prefrontal cortex. That's usually used in planning,
Mhm.
processing things, emotional regulation. However, when there's trauma, the amygdala is kind of, really firing, and the communication to the prefrontal cortex is disrupted. So what happens is then the trauma is kind of stored in a very vivid and emotionally charged way. That often is the thing that then causes the difficulties later on. Does that make
Wow.
sense?
Yeah. We're trying to understand how the human body works, but rather the human brain, works. But it's quite a pleasure, or rather not a pleasure. It's lots of information to understand here about what exactly is happening to us or to our brain, or how we think, the thought processes, and so on. But we're gonna have an interesting conversation with you, doctor, today. But what are the some common responses to trauma that will have imprint with a person, or somebody has caused some abuse, that kind of situation, or is it something that is very memorable, like a death, also could be a trauma?
Yeah. So trauma can be like a death, it can be something that you go through, it can be the loss of a friendship, it can be many things. As long as it kind of overwhelms your usual experience, wherever you feel powerless, that can be kind of experienced as a trauma.
Right.
So remember, trauma is an abnormal event. Okay, so whatever responses we have are normal responses to these abnormal events. Okay, so the responses that I'm going to share are not abnormal in any way. They're not wrong. They're not weird. These are normal responses. Okay, so let me go back to talking about the fight flight response, because that's how our amygdala works. So let me use an example. Like in olden times, when we were cavemen, this was still working. So imagine that you're a caveman and you are going to encounter a saber-toothed tiger. So your body needs to react very quickly. So
Right.
the first thing that happens, you notice, is your heart rate starts increasing, tick, 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 right? And why does our heart do that?
mm, Anxiety, we are preparing for warm up to run fast or to fight, like what you mentioned.
Exactly. So our heart starts beating fast because it needs to quickly circulate blood, oxygen, sugar, glucose to our lungs, to our brain. Because as humans, we don't have weapons, right? We don't
Right.
have claws, we don't have sharp teeth. Maybe if you keep long fingernails, maybe.
Yeah.
But we don't have these weapons. Our weapon is our brain. So our body starts preparing. Our breathing gets more shallow. Again, to try to circulate oxygen as fast as possible. Our blood starts rushing to our face. You feel hot. Our ears also feel hot. At the same time, our large muscle group starts getting blood flow, but our fingers and toes becomes a bit cold. That's why people feel this clammy kind of feeling. Also, our mouth starts to become dry because digestion slows down. It slows down because it's not needed at that point. So these are some of the things that happen in the fight-flight reaction. Okay, so the thing is, depends what reaction happens, depends on what our resources are at the moment. So for example, if the threat is something that we can face, for example, it's a baby saber-toothed tiger, it might be a fight reaction. Okay, but if it's like a very adult, large saber-toothed tiger, you're like, okay, I don't have my spear with me, I better flee. Okay, so that's kind of how it shows. But in trauma, it's in a way it's similar, but there's some differences. So for example, if you're undergoing, let's say, a traumatic event and the fight response kicks in, what you will experience is your jaw getting tense, your jaw clenching, your teeth grinding, your shallow breathing. And over a period of time, right, what happens if these responses continue is you start to feel maybe a lot of anger, resentment towards other people, feel maybe very critical of others. There's a lot of critical thoughts. You feel that other people are wrong. You notice that over time, the impact is you might be picking fights with other people, talking loudly, shouting, bullying. So these kinds of behaviors happens if kind of trauma is a very natural response, but let's say the trauma is not processed over time, these are some of the response that can happen in the fight mode. The next one is flight mode. Okay, so flight mode is when your resources, the threat is bigger than your resources. You need to get out of there. Your heart is still racing, you feel tension, you feel sick in your belly, you might feel more sensitive to touch, you're maybe looking around for cues like, okay, where can I run to escape? You feel anxiety, you feel fear. The thoughts are all about, I need to get out of here, I can't focus, my mind is blank. And how this looks like, let's say, in our kind of daily life, is maybe you notice that you avoid conflict, or if there's a fight happening, let's say your parents are arguing, or somebody is raising their voice at you, you tend to keep quiet, kind of look down, change the subject. Okay, I don't want to talk about this right now. You move away, or if something is happening, let's say with your friends, you might ghost them. So these are some examples of the flight reaction.
Right.
Now the thing is, we're talking. Sorry,
Doctor,
yes.
I mean, can I just ask you something here? So memory and trauma is totally different.
What do you mean by memory and trauma?
Like a memory, like like example, like a death, when that happened during a childhood. So it's like a very bad memory or something, a memory that is within a person. So how do we differentiate whether it's a trauma or memory that I'm thinking of? That could be a trauma, or can we classify that is a trauma, not a memory?
So I think the difference is then how you
Yeah.
experience it in your body and how it impacts your life. So
Right.
if it's something that is traumatic, there will be a profound effect. So there will be an effect. There will be an impact in your sense of self. It will be impact in your relationships. You'll feel it in your body. Yeah. With
Yeah.
terms of memories,
Mhm.
the memories can be traumatic. Like losing somebody, especially when you're very young, it can be very traumatic. And that memory, especially if it's still in the amygdala, it's still not processed properly, it can still be traumatic, or it can be something that, okay, you know what, this was very traumatic for me. I lost my dad. I feel very sad. I feel the grief. I feel the
Mhm.
loss, but I choose to kind of shove it into the cupboard. And when I talk about my dad again to my friends and stuff, I might feel sad, might feel lost, but I don't feel this level of, oh my God, this is a threat. I need to fight, or I need to flee, or I'm going to go through some other responses as well. So the way you respond to it is different. It doesn't feel like a
Right.
threat.
So then
It can
everybody
still.
responds it very differently, and the level of trauma it also depends on what they have went through. So there's no a standard. That's what we can actually from here. But doctor, also when we're talking about the
Mm,
misconceptions about trauma
mm.
response, how do we take it from here?
Okay. I haven't finished talking about some of the comments. I've only talked about the fight or flight, but let
Okay.
me continue with that a little bit more.
Sure.
So the fight or flight is kind of the first steps. But the thing is, what happens, right, if you can't flee? You can't
Okay.
escape. You're stuck. You can't escape, and you don't have the resources to fight the threat. For example, if you are being beaten by a parent as a child, I'm 3 years
Mm-hmm.
old. My father is beating the hell out of me because, I was noisy. I was just being a
Mm-hmm.
child. I was just playing. What can I do? I can't escape. There's nowhere
Mm-hmm.
to go. My mom is not helping me. So another mode is called freeze. This is the mode where to protect your mind, you leave your body. You feel the sense of numbness. There's nothingness, there's detachment, there's even feelings, dissociation. And how this is experienced in the body is that there's a slower heart rate, your voice becomes monotone, almost robotic, speech is flat. And what kind of behaviors you might see when this person grows up and be an adult, or even older over time, is the person might abuse substances, alcohol, maybe to feel, maybe dare, maybe some kind of daring activities. It might be binge
Mm-hmm.
watching TV, doing something mindlessly. Even in flight mode, when somebody feels a fast heart rate, they might, let's say, binge eat, or as an attempt to soothe those feelings, to go into the freeze mode.
Right.
These are some kind of behaviors. And your thoughts when you're in the freeze mode is kind of just blank, just
Mm-hmm.
darkness or blank. You might feel there might be some like fillers in your head, intrusive thoughts or nonsense things like words, pictures, or songs. But generally, it's the state of kind of unfrozen.
Right.
And in this mode, is when with that feeling that we get when we are faced with a threat and we procrastinate. This is the mode that actually is activated when we're procrastinating.
Right.
Yeah. So that is the freeze mode. The last one is the fawn mode. So this tends to happen if the trauma is longer term, like with child abuse or domestic abuse, sexual abuse. Basically, right, in order you can't in order to kind of get yourself out, you can't leave. The only thing you can do is kind of lessen the blow. So you start to people please. That's why it's called
Mm.
fawn. You start to people please. You start to become very vigilant to the cues around you. For example, if you grew up in a household with a lot of angry parents, you should know that one, let's say if the parent is coming doing something like that, you'll
Yeah.
know, okay, father is angry right now. I better go and hide. I better make sure that I'm
Right.
okay. Or mother comes home, slams the bag, okay, that means that yeah, she's angry. I better figure out how to please her. So the person will start maybe trying to please their parents. For example, oh, Papa, you're very angry. Oh, here, I made you a cup of tea. Enjoy your tea. How is your day?
Mm.
Let me massage you. And often this people pleasing is above and beyond the person's needs. So the person will be very hyper vigilant and focus on the other person to ensure
Right.
that their mood is stable. So the person is quite disconnected for themselves. They feel very anxious. The heart rate is very fast. They have a lot of worries and thoughts about how the other person might feel, how to placate the other person, a lot of overthinking sometimes to think about what does that action mean? What does that mood mean? Yeah. And so these are some common experience. Other common emotion and experiences that is across all kind of four modes is there's a loss of appetite, sleep problems, feelings of
Wow.
shame, feelings of anxiety, fear. These are all common kind of feelings across all the four modes: the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn.
Wow. Doctor, and it's quite not surprised, but to see that it also affects the emotions and the sleep pattern, the appetite, and the way you will be social with people. The whole thing just changes everything, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, totally, because it will affect your whole life, and you can see how trauma can affect relationships, right? You can see
Right.
that somebody has undergone trauma, especially when it's long. There's a hard time connecting or trusting other people, or people choose relationships that reenact the past abusive ones because it's familiar. Or maybe somebody who's in a perpetual fight mode is quite reactive, defensive. And you can see also how it affects an individual, because when all these responses are being activated, you tend to feel very powerless. You might feel ashamed. You might think this is me. There's something wrong with me. I'm out of control. But let me also remind everybody that if any of these responses that we've brought up here today reminds you of experiences you're going through, let me remind you, this is not you at all. There's nothing wrong with you. This is actually your body and your mind responding the way it should to terrible, abnormal events like trauma.
Right. Wow. Hey, doctor, just a quick question here as well.
Hmm.
Does this trauma can affect any age group, or is it only affects during the childhood?
So it can affect you at any time, at any age. Trauma that tends to happen when you are younger or more vulnerable will tend to have, let's say, a bigger response or a bigger impact. Just because we don't have as much emotional, psychological, physical resources.
Right. And is there any particular age group that we're looking at below 10 will be more higher to fall into a trauma if it's such an incident? Or is it like, as you become like 18, 20, you'll be able to manage it? Is there a certain age group that you use, or is something
So
that...
we are not immune. For example, I give you an example, okay? Today, if let's say I leave this podcast today and I go down the road and let's say somebody grabs my bag, grabs my bag and punches me in the face. I'm not going to be immune to a traumatic response. It's a normal human response. I'm going to feel very jittery. I'm going to feel very scared. I'm going to cry. I'm going to feel like it's not safe. I'm going to think twice before I come to this location. I'm not immune, even as an
Right.
adult, right? And as a child, but let's say, for example, if I am faced with, let's say, a shouting adult, let's say I go and buy, I'm queuing in line to buy, the latest Kopi, the most popular Kopi. I'm queuing in line and somebody cuts my queue, and then I go, excuse me, sir, you cut my queue, and the person, who do you think you are? And makes a racist comment or something
Right.
like that. But because I'm an adult, I can go like, look, I was in line first. I need you to step out of the way. I can advocate for myself. But let's say if that happens to a child, somebody comes and shoves the child and say like, get out of the way, and it's an adult, not two children. The child may just move away, cry, hide, because they don't have
Right.
the resources to be able to deal with it.
Mhm.
So they're more vulnerable. Same with an elderly person. If this happened to an elderly person, because they may be more vulnerable, more fragile, they may not have the resources to deal with it.
Wow. So situation changes. There's no particular age group. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, doctor. So we will go to the next question, which is we're looking at earlier on, we talked about the three myths or misconceptions about the trauma responses.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. So there are a number of myths and misconceptions about trauma. I think the top one I hear from my clients and other people, right, is that people feel like if they were to undergo trauma and they have some of the responses that I shared before, like disconnection, feeling angry, feeling fearful, people pleasing, they think they are weak.
Right.
So they go through a traumatic event, some over a period of time, long-term sexual abuse, multiple events. They think they are weak, but having these responses has nothing at all to do with weakness. You feel powerless and ashamed because the control has been taken away from you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing that saddens me the most when I hear people saying that, oh, I've been through this traumatic, my cousin used to abuse me when I was younger. I should have stood up. I should have said no. I should have done something. I'm weak. I'm like, come on, you're 4 years old. When he took, let's say, that ruler and you beat your buttocks until it was red, what can you do as 4 years old? You're just out
Mm-hmm.
of your diapers.
Right.
The fact that you are still standing here talking to me and suggests strength. The fact that you somehow got yourself out of it and then you learn from it, right? You're probably never going to do this to another child. That suggests strength. So that's one of the top misconceptions, that the person who has traumatic responses or undergoes trauma is weak.
Right.
Right? That's the first one. The second one is sometimes people think, right, that only big events are traumatic. So people will say, oh, but I didn't undergo a tsunami. Why would I have
Mm-hmm.
trauma? Oh, I didn't go into a car accident. Nobody died in my life. How come I'm experiencing these kind of experiences? Why do I feel anxious every day? Why do I feel like sensory overload? I need to shut down. No, the thing is, right, it's not really big events that are only traumatic. Trauma can result from a range of experience, including seemingly smaller events. It's kind of like the straws that break the camel backs. Okay? Example, if I grew up with very critical parents, one time your parent loses their temper at you, that's fine. It happens to all of us. But
Yeah.
let's say every day you come home, you hear, oh, you're so stupid, you're ugly, you're so fat, you're such a loser. Every day over a period of time, you hear, or you're in an environment where there's a lot of noise, not safety. It may seem like they're no big deal, but actually they
Mhm.
are. It accumulates over time. It's a cumulative effect. You will see this in, let's say, people who undergo systemic racism, poverty, um, and what's more important, right, is the person's subjective experience of the event. That is the thing that determines the impact on the individual, not how big or small the event is.
Right.
Because somebody can go through, let's say, like we've all just been through a huge collective trauma, COVID, and now
Mhm.
we're going through vicarious trauma when we look at all the things that's happening in Palestine, the Gaza Strip,
Right.
right? So we're all going through that as well. And these kind of things add up. So it's not just big events. It can be cumulative events over time. It can be small events. It can be mix of big and small. It's what happens is your subjective experience is the one that determines.
Right.
Yeah. Um,
No.
and the last myth, I hear this a lot, and I think you even brought it up earlier, that
Mhm.
sometimes the myth is that after you've been through a traumatic event, you're broken. You can never heal. That's it. You're going to be this way forever.
Mhm.
That's not true. Yes, trauma is life altering. It will change your life, and you've been through even a small traumatic. It will change your life because that's what it's supposed to do. You're supposed to learn from the trauma, and there is suffering. There is suffering. However, there's also opportunity for growth and healing. So after you've been through a traumatic event, when you take care of yourself, when you have support and people around you support you, you can heal and you can grow and learn. Um, let me give you a very common one that happens to a lot of people. So I think a lot of us go through generations where we are scolded. That the belief was punishment and scolding, but all this punishment and scolding kind of form this voice in our head that's very critical. Yeah, but
Yeah.
let's say now as parents, people who undergo that may think like, you know what, I don't want to scold my children. I want to be kind to them. I want to show them compassion. Okay, never mind. They got like I'm not so focused on getting 99%. Fine, they got 70%. They tried their best. This is the growth and change that happens sometimes after trauma.
Mhm.
Or if you can think of somebody who, let's say gone through a traumatic event, and one of the responses was to binge eat. Of course, if you binge eat, you will gain weight, right? And one of
That's
the
right.
events after that, the growth is I start to exercise. And I wonder if you've also experienced that in your line of work, that you see people who've actually gone through traumatic events and they're trying to recover, they're trying to heal, they're trying to take care of themselves. So they start exercise, they start to, care for themselves.
Mhm. All
Have
for
you
just turning inwards to them, and it's a period of time that they went through, and then they that's kind of a phrase that they don't want to be there again, and then once they start changing and doing things for themselves, they don't even want to talk about it anymore. The past experience, it's like I'm done with it, and I'm just putting it all over the back, and I'm not even thinking it's a memory, and then just going forward. I mean, I've seen a couple of cases like this before, dog.
Yeah, and exactly, like when I think you help people, let's say, to build their strength, that's
Yeah.
also building their resilience. And
Yeah.
then you start to grow because you learn things like, oh, actually, my body is mine. I can take care of it. I can build it. It can be strong. I can run 10 kilometers. I can lift, I don't know what's a heavy weight, 50 kilos and things like
Yeah.
that. So that's where the
Right.
growth and healing comes as well. So always remember, after trauma, you are never broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You don't need to be fixed. There is a wound and you can be
Mhm.
healed.
Right. Doc, we talk about the responses to trauma. We talk about the misconceptions of trauma responses. Does really trauma heal? Can someone heal from a trauma?
Yes. Definitely you can heal from trauma. I mean, first thing to share is not all experiences of trauma lead to disorders like PTSD or depression or anxiety, but it can affect us over a period of time. And no two people's response to trauma is exactly alike. Okay, after we've been through, let's say, an event that's traumatic, there's some level of acute distress. For example, like I said, if I was mugged, I would feel anxious, I would feel distressed, and that will dissipate over time. Okay, so first thing to do to heal from trauma is educate yourself about the trauma. what your responses are. Look through some of these experiences that we talked about. Say, do you notice that some of the experiences that you're feeling is more like freeze mode? If it's freeze, you notice that you are procrastinating a lot, or your mind is blank, or you feel like you need to shut down often. Something that might be more helpful for you to care for yourself is movement, exercise, playing, having fun, for example. So once you educate yourself, you know how to care and support yourself. If, let's say, your common response is agitation, you feel like you're clenching your jaw a lot, like clenching, you're biting down, you go to the dentist will ask you, do you grind your teeth? That is a sign that maybe, okay, my response is more fight, I feel agitated, my ears are hot. Might be exercise won't be helpful with this. Like high intensity exercises may not be helpful. Something like
Right.
breathing, yoga, challenging your thoughts, maybe going to a place where you feel very agitated. You might want to go into like a dark room, use a weighted blanket. If you're having sleep difficulties, you want to attend to the sleep. If you're having, let's say, difficulties connecting with people, you want to talk to the people and discuss how to support you. If you notice that you're pleasing people, you're thinking always about other people, you might want to set boundaries, kind of teach people how to interact with you safely. Yeah. So these are some ways that you can do yourself. Of course, with trauma, right, therapy is very important. You want to you want to find, let's say, a therapist, or go with therapeutic approaches that focuses
Yeah.
more on trauma. So often these therapies address the trauma, allows you the space to talk about the trauma, some education of what is going on for you, and teaches you how to regulate the amygdala's response. That is the thing that promotes the healing and recovery. Another way of healing, especially if you're a victim of a crime, take legal action if you can. Tell your friends, tell people what happened. Don't hide it all inside and feel like, oh, this is my fault, I'm ashamed, something's wrong with me. You might feel that way, but tell your friends, tell them what you're going through. Tell them if your spouse is hurting you at home. And also
Mm-hmm.
remember to have kindness and compassion for yourself. Don't look back and go like, oh, I was so silly, I should have, beaten him. But 5 years old, or your woman, your husband is screaming at you, what can you do?
Right.
Be kind to yourself and recognize that healing is a gradual process with ups and downs. Build your resilience um, by taking care of yourself. Put yourself as the priority. That is how you can heal from trauma. Once you recognize that you are important, you can heal and put yourself as priority.
Right. And doctor, we're talking about healing here, and when we say heal, everybody works differently. Everybody has a different limitations. Is there a minimum period that we are looking at? If someone said, "Hey, you got to heal from a trauma," is there like, okay, minimum 6 months? Can we put a number of months there, or it really depends on the individual and the therapist?
It really depends on the individual. I would say not so much about period of time that matters. It's kind of what you do in the period of time. So maybe I can share what being healed from trauma looks like. I think being healed from trauma looks like you feel more grounded. Your nervous system is more regulated. You don't feel so jittery all the time. There's some calmness. You notice that you sleep better. You
Mm-hmm.
notice that your interactions with other people feel more free, that you're not holding something at the back. You're not thinking about, let's say, what other people think of you all the time.
All right.
Maybe you feel more light, you feel more playful. You can, if you talk about something that happens to you, you're not like totally breaking down and weeping. You can kind of go, okay, this happened to me. This is my story, and I'm better. I'm here. And that, again, that process depends on the intensity of the trauma, the duration of the trauma, what
Mm-hmm.
are some of the things that happen. Because one way we can cope with trauma is abuse substances. So if you drink alcohol, you take drugs, you need to attend to that first. So it depends how complex things are. It can be a few months, it can be a few years.
Could we also say, Doc? I know I'm throwing some questions just out of that. Um, when we talk about trauma, we talk about healing. Is there a period? I mean, of course, we say there's no period of time, but we are just putting an. It really depends on individual. But can we
Mm.
say that all of us have went through some sort of trauma in our lifetime?
Yes,
All of
yes,
us.
yes, yes. We're human. Like I mentioned, trauma is, while a normal event, it's a human experience. Yes. I've experienced trauma. I've experienced small traumas, what we call small T's, big traumas. Yeah.
Hmm. And is it possible to find out what will affect us or what has affected us? Or are we in denial?
So I think you would know. So generally, yes, denial is a way of coping. It's actually
Mhm.
the flight or freeze response. Okay. So for example, right, if you notice a certain pattern that doesn't work well for you, for example, in a workplace, you feel like when somebody makes your boss gives you a suggestion, you feel like, oh no, I feel so anxious of this meeting. You know, what if my boss
Mhm.
doesn't like me? You know, what does she think of me? You know what, I'm just gonna like make myself like as small as possible during meetings. That might be due to a traumatic response. So in a session, right, what we'll do is understand, like, where did you understand what they're thinking? So, for example, a client is thinking, you know what, I just want to make myself as small as possible because I don't want my boss to see me and I don't want my boss to be angry at me. And I said, where do you get the idea from that your boss is angry at you just because you disagree? And the
Mhm.
person might think back, actually, I got the idea from, my grandfather. If I was to disagree, he used to tell me like, "Shut up, girls shouldn't speak. Sit in the corner."
Right.
I'd be like, "That is a traumatic event," and you may not see the link, but undergoing through talking about these events, talking about feelings that emerge in your day to day, kind of brings back some of the things that happen.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it can be things like so it can be, for example, like you might. So I can share maybe an event that I've been through. So for me, like I don't like you might not like certain things. It might be the reason of it. It might be a reason, a traumatic thing that I've been through. Example, I was hit in the face quite badly by a ball. So I do not like playing sports that have balls. Also, if
Okay.
my children come up to me and like try to like come and hit me in the face, I don't like it, and my reaction is quite like quite a fight reaction, like, nope, like stay away from me.
Mhm.
But the
Mhm.
reason why I react in that way is because I've been hit in the face and it hurt my
Right.
nose quite badly. So that is kind of traumatic response. But when I realized, the reason why I react this way is because of what happened to me in the past, that's where the healing begins. Then I know when, let's say, if I'm going to play tennis or whatever, I know to kind of prepare myself. Like, okay,
Protect as well.
yes, or maybe if my children are coming and tell me, don't hit me in the face. You can, if you really want to like play, you can tap my shoulders, you can
Yep.
kiss me on the cheek, that kind of thing. So that's where the healing is.
Right. Wow. So the body is just an amazing mechanism to protect us from the past. It's not more like a rehearsal, but I think it's more like a protection bubble that we are putting around us, and immediately we know how to respond to it. And also the viewers who are and listeners who are watching this, there's a copy with Vance, and today we are at 9 p.m. live. You can also send us your questions. We can definitely will answer that. Today's topic is responses to trauma, and today with me is my guest speaker, Dr. Hanita Assudani. And we are going to go into the next question itself. Doctor, we are going to go into support system. We talked about the myth, we talked about the responses to trauma, we even talk about the healing. How much of this support of the family and our friends that I know you talked about it. We have to tell our friends, I mean the trusted ones or the close ones, what's exactly is happening to us. But sometimes when we talk to our friends and loved ones, they may not be the expert or the therapist or the psychologist. So they may give another 5 or 7 of their experiences, will that be great? Or is this a first level of contact or first level of communication before seeking the experts?
Yeah, so there are lots of things we can do as a friend or a family member. And of sharing our own experience when somebody is talking about trauma as a first instance may not be that helpful. What's more helpful, right, if it's the person listens empathetically, kind of just let the person talk. Because remember this, when the person is coming to share with you about their traumatic event, they have to kind of rustle up some courage. It's scary to kind of even talk about what you're going
Mm.
through. So make that space for them. actively listen. Don't impose your judgments and opinions. Don't be, why never fight him off? Or something like that. No, reserve your comments to yourself. Being heard, just being heard and being understood is a powerful form of support, because the person who's been through that event doesn't feel alone. That's important. Nothing you can do is, if you know that people around you has been through trauma, or you notice trauma responses, is educate yourself. Learn about the effects of trauma to understand what your loved one is going through. Don't blame them for their experiences. Read books. There's so much information out there about trauma. There's two good books that I recommend. One book is The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and Be the Love That You Seek by Nicole LaPera. So hers is more about childhood, long-term events. Bessel kind of talks about different types of trauma. Research. Go to Instagram. Go and listen to people talking about their own trauma. There's lots of resources out there. Another thing you can do is respect the person's boundaries. If you notice that the person needs some space, they need space to process what they're going through, let them take the lead. Don't pressure them into disclose what they want. Don't pressure them. Tell me what happened to you. Then what he do. Then what he do. You're not interrogating for a police. It's not a police interrogation. Respect their boundaries. Just be there. They will share with you how much they want to share. And never underestimate the importance of practical assistance. Sometimes you cannot do anything emotionally. That's okay. Just support practically. If you notice, right, you go to your friend's house, the dishes are all piling up. There's hair in the sink, the drain in the toilet. House is a mess. Just clean up. Send food. Cook something. Or even, let's say, if you notice somebody who's been through birth trauma, that's a very common one. You go and visit your friend who's just given birth, and you notice that she's not doing well. Her birth is very traumatic. You have to have some interventions or emergency C-section. You probably know there might be some trauma. Your friend's not quite right. Just help. Say, what, I'm going to watch the child. You go and bathe. Or what, I can watch. Even you can watch the child for an hour. Or I will pick up the dishes. I will send some food. Think any kind of practical help. Right. In fact, I think the most help people can offer is kind of daily practical things. It can even be, let me help you call and make an appointment for you to cut your hair. Let me just do that. Let me just take that. It's kind of the stuff that we do after somebody has died. It's very similar that we try. You said, leave this with me. I'll do it. Very practical assistance. It might also be if you notice the person is a victim of a crime, you might want to give them resources. Like, I'll go with you to the police station to make a report, or help you engage with community professionals like Aware. I'll come with you. And the last one is encourage people to seek professional help, especially if you know that the kind of support is beyond your resources. You don't have to take that upon you, because then you yourself might feel resentful, might feel like, I want to stay away from this person, which is not fair to the both of you, right? So maybe you can offer to research mental health professionals or accompany them to appointments. Tell them like, I really care about you. I think you might need some professional help with what you've been through. Let me help you make a call. Here's the number for Alliance Counselling. You can send an email. I can do that for you. And that's crucial in the healing process. And these are some of the things that your friends or family members can do.
Doctor, getting help nowadays seems like weakness, but of course people are now overcoming it, right? No, if I need help, it's not weakness, it's my strength. People are coming forward. But if someone is going through some kind of a trauma or some kind of a psychological issues they are facing, depressed, no mood to socialize, there's no much of communications, losing weight, no much of entertainment, and so forth. The list just keeps on going. But how one should identify, or the loved one should identify that, okay, it is the right time to consider to get help for you, and sometimes some might not welcome the help. Say, no, why must I see a psychologist? I'm not so and so, I had to see a psychologist, because this is kind of a barrier they have, or they might also worry what others may say or see if I seek help. What is your take on this, though?
So, like what you said, right? Seeking help, right, is not a weakness at all. It's a sign of bravery and a sign that you care for yourself. I mean, we wouldn't think twice, right? Like if I have a cold, I have a cough, I wouldn't think twice. I'll go to the doctor and get a checkup. In fact, we'll ask doctor, okay, check whether I have COVID, check further, do even more checkups, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't think twice. Mental wellness is the same thing. So when the right time to consider help is the at any point of time where you feel you would like help or support. If you feel I would like to speak to somebody for support, I want maybe just to talk to somebody just to kind of let out what's in my head, that's the right time. And if the friend or family member that you're suggesting, here you can, maybe these are the resources, and the friend is saying, you know what, not for me, it's okay. Remember, respect their boundaries. They may not be ready. That's okay. Leave the card with them. This happened to me many times that I recommend to my clients or recommend. I just kind of go, you know what, this is the contact details, this is the card. Whenever you're ready. So when they're ready, they can just kind of be prepared, if that makes sense.
Right. So definitely seeking help is not a weakness anymore. I mean, that's what a lot of
It's never been a weakness, not just
never been.
anymore. It's never ever been a
Never
weakness.
been. But doc, I mean, of course, as a loved one, right? They might be over empowered and they say, no, do this kind of remedy, go for a walk, or you're crying, let me just cheer you up, let's go for drinking. So they might give their expertise, like what you mentioned, but the right time to get the help is very, very crucial, because any delay can be, it can go into a serious level so that we may never know. But in any case, if let's say if they want to get help, where they can get help, doc, from
So
Alliance.
yeah, so right, so if it's specific to trauma, right, for support for trauma, there's some specific things to look out for. You need to choose a therapist who can work in trauma, who has the training for trauma-informed care. So you will want to look out for the words of trauma-informed care, maybe somebody who practices EMDR, schema therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy for trauma. At Alliance Counselling, we have many such therapists because as an organization, we are very trauma-focused. Just like what we spoke about earlier, trauma is, we all have experiences of trauma. We have many such therapists, including myself. Um, in general therapy, when you go through for any mental health, depression, anxiety, any kind of mental kind of distress, therapy gives you a safe space to talk about this, gives you support, education of what you're being through. It also helps you kind of process the traumatic memories. So it stops being stuck in a very emotional state. It becomes more kind of a thinking, planning, more kind of a routine memory from your prefrontal cortex. Yeah. So the thing is, if you feel like seeing a counselor or therapist is too soon, you can start by using some apps. There's some very good apps out there like Calm, Intellect, Mindfulness Coach. You can start by just following therapy clinics on Instagram. Alliance, we have an Instagram page, or there's lots of people who do give very good mental health content. You can even think about, what you need right now. It might be that you're not ready, and that's okay. For example, Vance, what would you tell your clients if, let's say, they're looking to make a change, they want to get more fit, they want to get healthy? I mean, what would you tell your clients?
I mean, the most important thing is to get started, but of course, what actually inspire them to do that, right? I mean, there must be a kind of a situation that they may have went through. Maybe they have pondered it for more than a year, or maybe they have stopped it because of certain obstacles or financial issue. Oh, there's a lot of various, but knowing what is the best for them, that makes their journeys going to be very fruitful for them. So if someone say, hey, you know what, I want to get started in exercising, I want to look good, I want to look fit, I want to change my life, I want to be the hot 10 bots, in the upcoming magazine. Then, of course, let's get started up. It's a lifestyle, slow steps, but the most important thing is to take the first step of it. So that is a whole key for success.
Exactly. And that's the same thing with mental well-being. Take a step. The step can be something small. It can be today, I will follow an Instagram link. It can be today, I will watch this podcast. That is the first step. The next step could be, okay, let me ask for recommendations. That is also a step. It can be a bigger jump, like tomorrow I make an appointment and I see my therapist for, just think about one appointment first. If it works, I meet for a longer period of time. Exactly. Mental well-being is the same.
The first step. So, Doc, if any listeners or viewers who want to contact Alliance Counselling, how they can go about?
So you can reach us at admin@alliancecounselling.com.sg, and we have two outlets. One is at Cluny Court, and where I'm at East Coast.
Okay. The Bukit
So
Timah
I
Road,
think
it's also another location, right?
yes. Not so that's Cluny Court. So we've
Okay.
got in Cluny Court, that's 501 Bukit Timah Road.
Yeah.
And our other outlet, let me just pull up the address, and where
Sure.
I'm based in the East Coast.
Okay.
Um, is at
All right. So viewers
121
watching,
Upper
yeah,
East
one to
Coast
one.
Road.
Okay, 121 East Coast Road. Okay.
Yes, 121 Upper East Coast Road, 0201. Our contact number is 6466 8120.
8120. Okay, yeah, there you go. So the number is 6466 8120. So you
Yeah.
can actually contact them if you do need help. Help is not weakness anymore. It's about strength. It's about bravery. That's what we talked about. Doc, we are already in 50 minutes of our podcast today. Of course, we talked about the myth, the trauma responses, the way to what's the healing. This now we know that the healing depends on individuals and so forth. But we're going to go a little bit more into yourself right now. So, what motivated you to become a clinical psychologist?
Wow, I think it goes way back. So I'm somebody who is quite I've got high level of empathy. I consider myself to have this personality trait called an empath. So I can quite easily pick up, how people are feeling, how they're doing. And once you have this knowledge about how people are feeling and doing, you'll realize that there's a lot of suffering in this world,
Mm-hmm.
right? That most of the emotions we feel are not great emotions. That sadness, anger, jealousy, envy. So I can, when I was younger, I could tune into some of these feelings. And over time, I realized that if I provide support to other people, people do get better. They feel connected, they feel supported. So naturally, at first I thought this was being a brain surgeon or brain doctor because I didn't have the language for it. Um, and children, we will always know what a doctor is because you have to go for regular checkups, but you don't know what mental health is. Over time, I think when I was in my teens, that's when I realized actually the correct word for this is psychologist. So it's somewhere around my secondary school that I kind of felt like, okay, I want to be a psychologist. I
Right.
learned the different types of psychologists, and that's kind of what motivated me.
Wow. Okay, that's to get to know you a little bit more of you. And what is the best part of your job that you love doing?
Wow, best part of my job. There's lots of things good about my job. So I think the thing that touches me the most is when somebody who has been struggling for a while, or feeling that they're not good enough, and they start doing something, and they come into the session. I can just see the difference. They're walking like taller. You're beaming with pride. Um, they tell me that I'm so pleased with myself, or I did this differently today. Um, wow, I tell you, my heart melts when I see that. That's I go like, okay, this is why I do what I do. Because it can be tough, holding people's feelings, and being there for them. But this is the thing that I love doing. That's the thing. Yeah.
Lovely, Doctor. I mean, it's a great conversation with you for the past 54 minutes, but we're not letting you go off that soon. We got one more question for you. Currently, we are engaged. This is your Vance here, host for Kopi with Vance with Dr. Hanita Assudani, clinical psychologist from Alliance Counselling and NUS. So we have one more particular question for her. But if you're hearing this and watching this right now, please do share and like. We are live at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Doctor, for last question for the day, but what advice will you give to someone who's struggling with mental health issues but doesn't know where to turn up for help?
Yeah. So if you're struggling, just know that there are many places for help. Like mentioned earlier, you can start with apps like Calm, Intellect. If you think about what kind of difficulties you're going through, if you're going through a traumatic event, victim of let's say sexual assault, you can go through Aware. If you are LGBT, you have encountered, let's say, some kind of abuse, there's Uga Chaga. You can, come to us at Alliance at Upper East Coast Road. If you're thinking, okay, I want to go to public health, you can get a referral from the polyclinic. Yeah, so there's lots of places you can, read articles online. There's lots and lots of places to go for help. I think it's not really the issue of where to go for help. It's just kind of sometimes is that I'm not sure if I'm ready for help.
Yeah.
And like what we were discussing earlier, start somewhere. It's okay. Whatever you feel is the most doable, the little step, start there and then go. Yeah. And then look at different if you're at the point where you feel like you want to seek a therapist, read about the therapist, read their profiles. If it's on a private practice, their profiles, what they do, be there. If it's you're going to the public health system, all hospitals in Singapore has psychological wellness clinics. IMH, CGH, all saying, you can speak to them about what your needs are and you'll be matched with a therapist. Family service centers have counselors. There are a lot of social organizations like Aware, Ugachaga, have support. In doubt, we can always email any therapy clinic really and ask. You can email us at Alliance. Tell us what's going on for you and we will try to support you. If you're in school, speak to your school counselor.
Lovely, doctor. I mean, it's an amazing 56 minutes of your precious time on a busy day on Wednesday. So taking that time off and spending the quality time and on the podcast of responses to trauma. Thank you so much. Any tip of the day, Doc, before we end this podcast for viewers and our listeners?
I think the main thing is just remember, if you go through any of the experiences we've talked about today, these responses, they are normal. You are okay. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just going through a hard time. You're just coping in the way that your body is designed to cope. Just have kindness, grace, and compassion for yourself like you would do other people. And that's my biggest tip to people.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you so much. And another Starbucks, if not Joe and Doe, coming up next will be our second coffee session. Maybe a tea, depending.
It doesn't have to be caffeinated beverages, but yes,
water,
coffee.
Water. Yeah.
Maybe the viewers can recommend where's the best coffee in Singapore.
Yeah. And for another great conversation with you, doctor. Thank you so much spending your time with me. And we are viewers at Kopi Events. And viewers who are watching this, we will be at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and you can watch this video and audio as in YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn as well. Thank you so much, Doctor. We will stay connected and we will be in touch again.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me today, Vance. And thank you everyone for taking the time out of your schedules to listen to us. Please, if after this you have any comments or questions, please feel free to ask. We're here.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
Thanks.
Thank you, Doctor.
Bye. Yeah, bye-bye.
So that's Dr. Hanita Assudani, clinical psychologist from Alliance Counselling and NUS. So it's today's topic is all about responses to trauma. We talked about what is trauma, what is the three myths of trauma, and also the healing part as well. And also to find out about Dr. Anita's psychology, why she got interested to become a psychologist and so forth. But I think overall it was a great experiences. So viewers, if you do answer that as well in the comment section, or you can watch these podcasts at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and socials, YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. This is your Vance host for tonight, and adios, amigo. I'll catch you soon on the next podcast. Till then, bye-bye.